All right, so we're diving deep into Texas child support today. You shared some excerpts from Navigating Child Support, the Texas edition, and it seems like you're looking for some help to make sense of it all.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely. So let's start with the big picture. What makes Texas child support so unique?
Well, right off the bat, this source emphasizes that Texas is all about efficiency. They've designed a system that tries to avoid those long, drawn-out court battles.
Okay, so less courtroom drama, more straightforward solutions.
Exactly. It's more about resolving things administratively whenever possible.
And how does that actually work in practice?
A lot of it is handled through something called the child support review process.
Okay.
Basically, a child support officer acts as a mediator, helping parents try to reach an agreement without all the legal battles.
That sounds promising. Less conflict, lower legal fees.
Right. But here's the thing. Texas also has a reputation for being very strict when it comes to enforcement. They want to make sure those child support orders are actually followed.
So it's kind of like a balancing act. Efficiency on one hand, serious consequences for noncompliance on the other.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that balance is really what sets Texas apart from other states.
It makes you wonder if those differences actually lead to better outcomes for the kids, right?
Definitely something to think about. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of how child support is actually calculated and enforced, we need to talk about paternity.
Right. I noticed that paternity plays a big role in Texas law.
It's absolutely crucial. In Texas, establishing paternity isn't just about biology. It's about legally recognizing a father's rights and responsibilities.
So if paternity isn't legally established, a father can't even seek custody or visitation.
Exactly. And on the flip side, he can't be held responsible for child support either.
So it's a two-way street. The source mentions this acknowledgement of paternity form, the AOP. What's the deal with that?
The AOP is super important, especially for unmarried parents. It's basically a voluntary way to acknowledge paternity, and it kicks off the legal process.
But I'm guessing there's some rules around that, right?
You bet. There's a 60-day window for revocation. So if someone signs the AOP but then changes their mind, they need to act fast.
So once that 60-day window closes, or if a court order is issued, it becomes much harder to challenge paternity.
Exactly. Now, what happens in those cases where paternity is disputed? Well, DNA testing comes into play. And in Texas, those DNA test results carry a lot of weight in court decisions.
That makes sense. But you know what really caught my attention? That part about paternity fraud. That seems like a whole other layer of complexity.
It is. Paternity fraud basically means someone's falsely identified as a child's father. And Texas takes it very seriously.
So there are legal consequences.
Definitely legal remedies,
Every.
but in some cases, it can even lead to criminal charges. Texas law recognizes how damaging false paternity claims can be.
Wow. So paternity isn't just a biological fact. It's a legal cornerstone with some serious implications.
Absolutely. And once paternity is established, the next question is, okay, how much child support is owed?
And this is where Texas does things a little differently, right?
Right.
With that percentage of income model.
You got it. Most states use these really complex formulas with all sorts of variables, but Texas keeps it simple.
All right, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me. How does this percentage of income model actually work?
Basically, they start by looking at the non-custodial parents' net resources. And there's a cap, $9,200 per month. Anything above that isn't automatically included in the calculation.
Interesting. So even if someone's making bank, it's not a free-for-all when it comes to child support.
Nope, there's a limit. Then they take a percentage of those net resources, and the percentage depends on how many kids are involved.
So a higher percentage for more kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Texas mandates both medical and dental support as part of the child support order. It's not just about that monthly payment. It's about ensuring the child's well-being.
And this is unique to Texas.
You got it. And studies have shown that it really does have a positive impact on kids' health. They're more likely to get those regular checkups and preventative care.
So it's a more holistic approach to child support.
I like that.
And yeah.
But of course, the financial side is still important. What exactly do they include in those net resources?
It's not just a paycheck. It can include wages, self-employment income, rental income. But there are deductions allowed too, things like taxes and health insurance premiums for the child.
So they're looking at the big picture, both income and expenses.
Right. They want to make sure the calculation is fair and reflects the non-custodial parent's actual ability to contribute.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of how child support is calculated in Texas, but how does custody factor into all of this?
Great question. And it leads us to another area where Texas has its own unique language. They call custody, conservatorship, and visitation possession.
Yeah, I noticed that in the source. It's like they got their own legal dictionary. So what's the most common custody arrangement in Texas?
The most common is joint managing conservatorship, or JMC. Basically, it means both parents share decision-making power when it comes to the child.
So they both have a say in things like education, healthcare, religious upbringing. Exactly. But here's the catch. JMC doesn't automatically mean equal physical custody. One parent is usually designated as the primary custodian, meaning that's where the child primarily lives.
Okay, so they might share decision-making, but the day-to-day living situation could be different.
Right. And then there's this thing called the Standard Possession Order, or SPO, which outlines the default visitation schedule for the non-custodial parent.
Lots of acronyms. But it sounds like Texas really likes having clear guidelines and procedures.
Absolutely. And speaking of structure, let's talk about the other side of the coin enforcement. We touched on it earlier, but it's worth diving a bit deeper.
Yeah, from what I've read, Texas doesn't mess around when it comes to collecting child support.
You're not wrong. They have a reputation for being strict, and for good reason. They want to make sure those kids are getting the financial support they need.
This source talks about some pretty serious consequences, like license suspensions, even jail time.
It can get pretty intense.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about driver's licenses. They can suspend professional licenses too, which can obviously have a huge impact on someone's livelihood.
Wow, so they're hitting people where it hurts their ability to work and provide.
And it goes further. They can deny passports, prevent international travel. They can even put liens on property, making it hard to sell or refinance.
It's a powerful message. Don't mess with Texas child support. But what about those situations where life throws you a curveball? Job loss, illness, unexpected expenses. Can child support orders be modified?
Absolutely, Texas understands that things change.
So there's some flexibility built into the system.
Definitely. There are options for modifying the order. Sometimes it can be handled through the Office of the Attorney General, but sometimes you might need to go back to court.
And I'm guessing those modifications depend on the specific circumstances, right? A minor change in income probably wouldn't have the same impact as a major life event.
Exactly. The court will decide whether the change in circumstances is significant enough to justify a modification. And that's where things get even more interesting, because Texas law addresses all sorts of special situations that go beyond those standard cases.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. I'm definitely curious to learn more about those special situations.
Well, let's save that for our next segment. It's where the real nuances of Texas child support come into play. Okay, so let's dig into some of those special situations where Texas child support law goes beyond those standard calculations. One that comes up a lot is high-income earners.
Yeah, we talked about that $19,200 cap earlier. So what happens when someone earns way more than that? Does Texas just ignore all that extra income?
Not exactly. While the percentage of income model uses that cap as like a starting point, Texas courts can actually go above and beyond it. If a child's needs require more support even beyond that capped amount, the court can order additional child support on top of what's calculated using the standard formula.
So like if we're talking about private school tuition or expensive extracurricular activities or specialized medical care, those kinds of things could justify going above the cap.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that a child's needs aren't always neatly contained within those standard percentages, especially when you're dealing with higher income levels. It's about making sure the child has access to opportunities and resources that align with their family's financial situation.
That makes sense. It's not about punishing high earners. It's about making sure the child benefits from the resources that are available. Now, on the flip side, what about situations where income isn't so stable? This source mentions fluctuating or irregular income, which seems particularly relevant for self-employed people or those working in seasonal industries.
Right, that can be tricky.
Yeah.
How do you calculate child support when someone's income is constantly changing? Well, Texas courts have a few options. They might average the person's income over a longer period, like 12 months, to get a more stable number.
That seems fair. It smooths out those peaks and valleys without unfairly penalizing someone for having an unpredictable income.
Exactly. But there's also the other side of that coin. If a parent intentionally tries to reduce their income or hide assets to avoid paying child support, the court can step in and actually impute income based on their earning potential.
So you can't just suddenly decide to become a yoga instructor and claim you can't afford child support anymore. The court will look at your skills and work history and determine what you should be able to earn.
Right. It's about preventing parents from gaming the system to avoid their financial obligations. Now, let's switch gears to a completely different situation, incarceration.
Obviously, if someone is incarcerated, their ability to earn income and pay child support is pretty limited. How does Texas handle those cases?
Well, Texas law allows incarcerated parents to request